Welcome to the Moments That Matter podcast. I am your host, Laura Escamilla.
And I'm your co-host, Isaac Escamilla.
Thank you for joining us today. Today, we're going to have a little discussion about something that happened over spring break. And it's a big deal that parents, students, everybody should know about. UT Austin has decided to reinstate standardized test requirements. They're now going to be looking at SAT and ACT scores again to be admitted. It was test optional during COVID. And the thing is that most schools, or a lot of schools, are transitioning back to testing using SAT and ACT scores. So far, we have Yale, MIT, Georgetown, Dartmouth, Brown University, and now UT Austin is the latest one a couple weeks ago to make this transition. And this comes after the fact that they had a record high number of applicants, 73,000 last year. And more than 90% of those took the standardized tests and exams, and 42% of those submitted those test scores. And they find that the test scores are a big indicator of student success in college. So
that is interesting. So I do remember reading that Baylor University also had a record number of freshman applicants this past year.
Yeah.
But they've always used those SAT, ACT scores for merit scholarships.
Right. So that is big. I preach it till I'm blue in the face. It's better to have it than not need it. And test optional means optional for admittance, but scholarships in general, a lot still use these scores. I know there's a big discussion about how it's unfair that they're going back, that students weren't prepared, that now they have to test, where a junior currently wasn't planning to take ACTs, SATs, and if they want to go to one of these schools in 25, they have to take the test. Now they have to find where to take a test. Now they have to start studying and do all these things. But I would submit that they should have been taking them anyway.
I think so. And
should have been preparing anyway.
Has been a time-honored tradition. And we did it, and we took both tests, and it was something that was very much expected from the university because it was not optional. You had to submit one of your scores.
And I think we're 4 years out now from COVID, and I think a lot of schools are starting to go back and check to see all the changes they made during COVID. I think it's happening on school district level too, not just universities, but reevaluating the policies and how it's affecting them and changing. And I know that SAT, ACT scores, these standardized tests, although there is a big argument to be had for it is not the only indicator of success. There could be students who are just not good testers and that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
But still great students. However, research finds that it is a very good indicator of the success that a student will have in the classroom in college. And it's important when you have 73,000 students applying and you can only let in a small percentage, you have to have something to differentiate them.
You know, all things being equal, if they all have perfect grades coming out of their high schools, how do you differentiate who gets merit aid, I should say, and how do you differentiate who gets admittance without another score or metric?
Yeah, and historically, standardized test scores positively correlate with higher GPA in college. The stronger you do on your standardized tests, the better your GPA is in college. I think I read somewhere that it is 0.8, almost a whole point higher for your GPA if you do 0.86 points higher during their first semester of college if their standardized test scores are higher. So
it's a noticeable difference.
Yeah, and they want their 3 and a 3.8 is a huge difference.
It is.
And they want to ensure that students are successful and they get in, especially with these universities that have made these changes. These are Ivy League schools. These are schools that are very difficult to get into. Again, Yale, MIT, Georgetown, Dartmouth, Brown, UT Austin. All the students applying there are great students.
Yes.
So they have to have a measurement. And I think that's just the best way to do it. And I imagine that the process of admitting students on test optional or a holistic process is very difficult because, like you said, students start to look
exactly
the
same.
same.
And it's very time consuming. They
For sure.
probably have a really essential staff at any of those offices. I'm pretty sure there isn't anybody who doesn't need to be there. They run their budgets pretty tight. And it's a lot of work for them to do.
Yeah. And so here to say that schools are going back to this is going to go into effect for 25 admittance. So all the juniors right now, we're April, junior year, you need to start looking at your test sites, your testing options now for fall, because in April, May, June, July, in 3 months, you're going to start applying for college.
And one of the
So,
things that's really important is to give your student enough time to retake the test. I know for both of our students, when they were growing up, they got their initial score from that initial run, and we needed to get a little bit higher so we can qualify for the proper merit aid so they can go to the schools they wanted to go to. And they had to study and they had to take it again.
Yeah.
And we're successful and we're able to score what they needed to score to go to school there.
Skylar, we had her doing tutoring before she took her exam the first time. And we did that preemptively because we knew that she was not confident in math and we wanted her to be prepared for that.
Yes.
So she did probably like 4 months of tutoring
I do
prior
remember that.
to the exam. And then Lucas, we let him take it, see what happened. And he got a decent score, but not high enough. So then we just did the online tutoring through Khan Academy for a good month and then rescheduled the tests. And he did what he needed the second time around. But you're right. You need to allow time for your student. You need to schedule the tests. They're usually way in advance.
Yes.
They're not like this weekend or next week.
No.
They're way in advance.
And seats are limited. You can't just show up for
Right.
a test or just assume that there will be enough spots for you at any given date.
Right. So you need enough time to plan it, to schedule it, and then study for it. And if you have a student who struggles with testing, who gets test anxiety, it definitely is to their benefit to do Khan Academies, to do test prep to help ease that, alleviate that stress. But it is so important, again, say it over and over, take the tests and don't exclude yourself from the situation. Maybe your student is still going to want to apply to schools that is test optional, but the last thing you want is for the student to decide they want to go to one of these schools or apply to one of these schools and they never took their tests. And then you don't know where they stand. At least you know where they stand.
Yes.
By taking these exams. You know where they range. And even for yourself, I know for myself, when we were looking at Skylar going to Baylor and what are the odds that she can get in, because it's not the easiest school to get into. And right there on the website, like every other school website, tells you the median score for their freshman class that came in. It is a 26. So you know
that's a target.
That's a target, right? That's, for one, that's a target if you want your kid. If your kid is taking their exams and they get a 20, odds are they're not going to get in. That's just the truth. You got to know where you stand. So that's a good indicator before you even start applying or start having these discussions. Know where your kid stands, where they stand themselves, what they have to work for. Obviously, you don't want the median. You want to get the highest.
Exceed, right? Sure.
But at least, and every school offers that information. Every school shows facts on their entering class, what their average score was in their ACT and SAT and what have you. So you can know that for any school. And it's best to have it. And
yeah, definitely. Now, as far as the test is concerned, I did read that the ACT is updated. The ACT is updated. SAT. I don't think the ACT has changed.
The ACT has not changed. So the SAT is a new digital test format. The student still goes to a testing site, usually at their school.
So it's still proctored.
Yeah, and they can be provided with a computer or take their own computer. It is a whole system, but it is all digital now. So this just rolled out, I think, in January of this year was the first of the new tests that started getting done. And it's not take home. Tests are offered at school during the day or on the weekend. They're still proctored. Students can use their own laptop or tablet or use a school issued. I think there's even an option to notify College Board, who administers the SAT.
College Board is the one who administers this.
Yeah, so you can let them know even, and they'll send you a device to test on and then get it sent back. What has changed, there's a lot of changes, but it's supposed to be for the better. What is the biggest difference between the SAT and the ACT now is that this new digital format only takes 2 hours.
That's a lot shorter.
Yeah, so the original test took students 3 to 4 hours. The ACT is still that length and is still in writing, and they get their results within days as opposed to weeks that it takes to find out their scores.
This is even better.
So the biggest thing is the way it's administered, the length, again, cutting it by an hour, the format, it is all streamlined, digital, answering questions.
I heard the questions were a little bit shorter.
The essay questions are shorter.
Yeah.
And easier, quicker for them to read. And one of the other things is it adjusts with the way you're answering questions.
It's adaptive.
So it's adaptive. So if you answer some questions incorrectly, it asks you more questions to see if you're familiar with the content.
Yes.
And if you answer the questions, immediate questions correctly, then it pushes you forward. Okay, you know this. Let's continue going. We're not going to test you more on this. I'm not sure. Obviously, we'll need to learn what the pros and cons of that is, but it's adaptive. And that might be why it's shorter for some students in that sense. Also, you don't have to take a calculator with you anymore or a pencil because it is provided. It's all part of the software of the testing.
There is an online calculator, as I understand.
Yeah. So when it's proctored, there's a digital clock that's running. It has an online calculator for you. So you don't have to take that. You don't have to go searching for calculator and finding it, pulling it out of the dust with dust bunnies on it to find it and get batteries and all that. I know that was
absolutely. So I believe the calculator that's baked into the SATs is now the Desmos calculator, which is freely available to anyone online. We use it for the STAR exam. There's a version of the Desmos calculator
That's
baked
great,
in.
so students can practice on it.
Yeah, it's very familiar to them. A lot of students have already been using Desmos because, well, one, it's free, it's available. And graphing calculators are still very expensive.
Cool. So that's good to know. And we were talking about the format for the passages on the SAT. So they'll be shorter. Each passage will correspond with only one question. So as opposed to, I think it used to have 3 or 4 questions related to the same passage.
That's how I remember it.
This is the question. Where you had to go back and keep checking everything. But this is one passage, one question. And you continue, and they're shorter.
That's definitely going to contribute to cutting down on that time.
Yeah,
for the test.
Sure. And then again, the biggest thing is that the official scores will be delivered more quickly in a few days as opposed to weeks after the exam. And I believe it's called Blue Book app. That's what the SATs is calling it. So there's a lot of new changes to it. Again, I don't know which one is better. I think they both test, ACT and SAT both test different things.
Yes.
Our kids, I feel like they did better on the ACTs. I'm not sure why, but that's what my recollection is of it.
Right.
That definitely want to look into it. And if the benefit of this is if your student does have test anxiety, a shorter test is way easier.
They're going to be a little easier to take on if they know it's going to be a shorter test.
Yeah.
I did read that if you have some sort of visual impairment or something severe, there's a rare exception where you can get a paper test for the SAT even still.
Okay. So that's good to know too. I think one of the biggest things was that this is a less stressful situation and you don't have the proctor yelling at you. The app is telling you the time and will cut you off, and there's still a proctor to watch to make sure that you're, not cheating or whatever.
Yes.
But it does get stressful for students to be called out times and be watched like that. So I think this is supposed to alleviate that stress. But again, it had just rolled out in January, so we want to see how that works. But the biggest thing is take the test, take the SAT, take the ACT, and just get really, especially juniors right now, sophomores too, but the seniors, current seniors who are applying to colleges, I think some of the Ivy Leagues did already go into using their tests.
Yes.
But definitely for Texas, UT, Austin being one of the largest universities in our state and one of the most coveted ones, they definitely switch. So 6% automatic admit, but they're going to use those test scores.
Definitely. And I fully expect other universities to follow suit.
Yeah, for sure. I expect that too. I just, there's just so much research that proves that the success rate based on the higher test scores is indisputable. There's a direct correlation. And again, I know that there's arguments to be made for it is not a pure example of what the student can do. And it is not, but it is a good indicator. And that's all they have when you're processing thousands and thousands of applications and data where almost everybody looks the same. You have to use every indicator possible.
I agree.
So this podcast is our second to the last for the season.
The penultimate for the season. This is going to be a slightly shorter season.
Yes. And unfortunately, I have a lot of work, my actual paid job ahead. We're going to make a shorter season, but we'll be back for the summer and to have a discussion about getting ready for applying for colleges again. So
detail and point out those moments that matter, so to speak. Wow.
So and next episode, we're going to talk about preparing for summer and what all our juniors need to be doing to get ready for application season, just to start the summer off because it's around the corner. And thank you.
Thank you for listening.